Joining me now to discuss is Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy, Grant Newsham. Thank you so much for joining us, Grant. Maduro is here in New York City as we speak. He's expected to be arraigned in short order. What is your reaction to his apprehension by U.S. forces on Saturday?
Well, it was quite an impressive operation to grab him, and I think it was a good thing that he was removed. The real question now, of course, is what happens, because he's got a lot of cronies. He's got a very sort of vicious secret police, largely with a lot of Cuban involvement in there as well, but it's committed at least 19,000 murders during the course of the last 25 years. So what if they just hunker down? I hope the American planners have thought of this. But also, you notice that a lot of the explanation, justification is based on, you hear oil mentioned a lot, but what you really need to pay attention to is how Venezuela was being used as a platform by the Chinese, the Russians, the Cubans, the Iranians, both to launch drug warfare against the United States, gang warfare as well. The Venezuelans, of course, sent up their best gangs for that, but also to put in place a military presence that potentially threatens the United States and its key infrastructure as well. So that alone was reason to go after Maduro, to bring back a consensual, legitimate government. There it already exists. It was elected in 2024. So you couldn't allow this to continue happening under America's noses. And the Chinese were glad to have us just lying around doing nothing. This has put them on the back foot a bit.
Yeah, and to your point, Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez calls this a Berlin Wall type of moment. That's a pretty big comparison. Do you agree?
It's pretty close to it. As you notice how sort of the free world, the civilized world, had just sat around and done nothing, while Chavez and then Maduro turned Venezuela from a democracy, from a sort of free market society into a police state. And the reason they do that is because they could get away with it. And there's too many cases of that around the world, historically and certainly now. So finally, somebody actually stood up and said, look, enough's enough. And that last election they held in Venezuela, that was the cheating, the fraud was so immense that the Venezuelan regime didn't even try to hide it. And over 70% of Venezuelans wanted somebody different. And now they just might have a chance to get it, but there is a lot of work to be done.
So talk a bit about that work. I mean, Venezuela's Supreme Court just made Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, the interim president. How does this play out with President Trump saying the U.S. will run Venezuela?
Well, I'm hoping that Mr. Trump's commentary was the sort of language that you hear in a press conference where you don't get into the details. But I do hope that the U.S. government, the military, State Department, etc., all carefully plan for what is going to come after this, because you may have taken Maduro out, but you have still got this repressive police state in place. And maybe it will collapse. Maybe the military and parts of the security services have been worked on by, say, the U.S. intelligence agencies so that they will give up. But it remains to be seen. It was a very impressive operation today, but in some ways that was maybe the easy part compared to what's coming. Because there is, as I said, this regime in place. And what if they just hunker down and say, we're not going anywhere? I hope this has been thought through.
Sure, and President Trump did say they were set up to conduct a second assault if needed, and perhaps they're still set up in that position. I mean, they're saying that U.S. forces will remain in that area. A massive, something like 25% of the U.S. fleet is there. So what would that presence mean and that potential threat mean to any remnants of the Maduro regime?
Well, there's a lot of force we've got in the region, and you can see how it can be used very effectively against key targets. But there is a limit to how much you can bomb a country into doing what you want them to do. And said the good intelligence works, the persuasion that should have been done earlier. Hopefully it has been done. Give some of these key figures in the regime a chance. You either you can go somewhere else and live on a beach somewhere, or your future is not going to be happy. It's your choice. But if it's just a question of bombing a country until it gives up, that's hard to do. So there's hopefully a lot of work that has been done elsewhere beforehand.
And Grant, staying with the operation that actually extracted Maduro, as a Marine Corps veteran, how would you rate the precision strike that led to his arrest?
Oh, on a scale of about 1 to 100, I'd give it about a 200. It was incredibly impressive. And everyone involved in that deserves a lot of commendation. Additionally, they were able to keep it secret, which was even more impressive. And one notes how effectively they slipped through the Russian and the Chinese air defenses in Venezuela. So militarily, the U.S. can do all sorts of things, but when you do deal with a country like Venezuela, force isn't the only thing that you can use, and particularly it's a big place, and it's going to take some sort of political efforts, political warfare as it is, to change things. And one of the advantages, though, is you do have a legitimate government in place. And the idea is that, well, they're going to come in and take over. And there's all sorts, of course, of economic pressure that you can put on Venezuela so that the Chinese can't keep propping them up. The Cubans are hit by the cutoff of oil to them. The Iranians, they have a very hard time as well, and the Russians as well. You'll notice that these countries that said they were going to support Venezuela, the Chinese, the Russians, well, they haven't done anything of the kind. So there's still things that we can do in addition to a potential military threat. But ultimately, it's those key pillars of the regime, particularly the coercive parts of it, the secret police, the interior ministry, the counterintelligence services. Most of those people would rather stay alive and maybe have a decent life somewhere else, but you have got to apply pressure on them and also support the Venezuelans that want consensual government and that have suffered trying to bring this about, the ones who still remain in Venezuela and the ones overseas. So this is a sort of a complex operation that they've got going now with Venezuela, and it remains to be seen how it will turn out, but it was a good day yesterday. I think as Gordon Chang said, yesterday was Venezuela's 4th of July, because what has happened to Venezuela over the last 25 years has been a tragedy. And the free world has just stood by, wringing its hands with eyes primly averted, while you had thugs take over the place, turn it into a narco state, drive out many of the decent peoples, export too many of their bad people to the United States, cooperate with regional drug traffickers and other governments to pump drugs into the United States, giving the Chinese communists who say they're going to kill us, giving them a platform from which to operate, allowing Cuba to continue, letting the Iranians get in and put in drone factories and missile platforms as well. And the Russians as well have been doing all sorts of things down. But you couldn't allow that to continue. So finally, somebody did something more than just wringing their hands.
So, Grant, you're enumerating the legacy of Chavez and Maduro. What does the end of the Maduro regime, hopefully, ultimately, mean for the Venezuelan people?
Well, it will give them a chance to have a consensual government, to have a free market, a place where it's not run by thugs and their cronies who all benefit and drive everyone else out of the country or to live in poverty. This has been too often, has been allowed to happen around the world because these guys can get away with it. One remembers Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. If he had been removed early on after he had killed 20,000 Matabele tribesmen in 1982, well, that country would have avoided a lot of horror. But you've seen too many of those sorts of things happen. And these sorts of regimes, it's good to finally see somebody sort of put them on short notice and then do something about it. But it gives the people who want honest government, who want a decent, fair society, it gives them some oxygen. Otherwise, they just get strangled by the secret police and run by the Cubans and Venezuelan thugs. So that is what we're seeing at stake here, seeing happen here really is the idea of supporting freedom and not just standing by with eyes primly averted while a country, a democratic, free country, has freedom snuffed out.
This is really is
that we see too much of.
Such an important moment for the Venezuelan people. We have about 30 seconds here, Grant. Maduro met with Chinese officials in Venezuela hours before his arrest. You mentioned Venezuela's friends. The two nations have supposedly been close allies, but that didn't pay off ultimately for Maduro. What message does this send to other Chinese allies?
Well, they ought to pay close attention to it, particularly unless they're right next door to China. It's a long way away, and you saw that China couldn't do anything to save them. These guys do have a pretty good sense of their own mortality and how to stay alive. And if it's relying on the PRC to come and help you, well, maybe that isn't the best bet to make.